Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Coach's Corner. We have a special guest with us, ApolloKage, and we're going to be talking about, of course, Snake. So, obviously, Snake has only been in two Smash games, Brawl and this one. So, we got two versions of him. Uh, I think one small sidebar we can talk about before we get like into the nitty gritty is what you guys think, or do you think Brawl Snake or Ultimate Snake is better? And we can also just talk about a little bit about Brawl Snake. I think some of the interesting stuff of Brawl Snake is going to be like the bigger hitboxes, right? Because his model got shrunk down, but they didn't shrink down his hitboxes. And I mean, I think that's like the biggest thing. And then obviously you had Dacus. But before we get into that topic, let's go around the horn. How you guys doing?
Good, man. It's been great. Having a wonderful time. Dude, we've honestly had some incredible Smash for this past like month, man. It's been insane. Obviously, AK a big part of that as well, right? So it's been a good time. But yeah, going into your discussion about Brawl Snake versus Ultimate Snake, I know you and I talked a little bit about it before. I think Brawl Snake is better personally, but like I feel like it's very interesting because we talked about like what things do you take from Brawl Snake, right? Does he get brawl mechanics or the capacity to deck as deal those kind of things as well? Um, but it's like I always think that already there are certain things that Snake can do that were crazy. If he could have some of those guaranteed options in the game, like if he was able to pull that over into with actual hit stun, or I guess no hit stun canceling as it is in Brawl, then that character would be absolutely just doing nonsense. But Ultimate Snake has a ton of different things too, right? And again, AK, like it's been cool to see you kind of really be at the forefront of a lot of those things too. We also had a guy, Johnny Westside, who was he was like a labber as well. So yeah, I'm sure you know that guy, the homie.
Yeah, early on,
Um,
early on.
yeah, early alt, right? And found some stuff in there too. But Snake has a lot of tech as always, right? And just a very varied character. So um, it's kind of cool to see how they were able to reimagine Snake while kind of taking away some of the things that he had in Brawl, but still being a really strong character.
Gotcha. Okay. So my take on like the Brawl Snake versus Ultimate Snake debate is that I think like in terms of like the meta relevancy or like how hard late in the meta will hit a character, I think it's gonna hit Ultimate Snake less hard than Brawl Snake. Like at the beginning, Brawl Snake was like second on the tier list, right? And he was like winning most of the things that he would attend or like getting top two. But I think like some quality of life changes in Ultimate helps Snake out a ton. So like for example, directional air dodge, it pays the bills. Like that
Thousand
for
percent.
Snake is like something that puts him up an entire tier. Aside from that, I think that like Nikita and just like the jump squat changes, like they super help out Snake. Downer is now frame 6, so that was like a struggle in Brawl. Is like you couldn't really do much with a frame 9 jump squat. Like that was not like super premeditated. So it'd just be like even though his grounded moves were insane, he had Dacus, he couldn't really like play the aerial game as much. So like something that'll do a lot in this game is like double jump nair or just like double jump aerial callouts in general. I think those have like a lot more potential along with like I'm working on something right now to where with like Nade where you can like anti-air with an aerial while Nading, and then like if it doesn't work out, you can like land shield with grenade. So I think there's potential there along with like Nade Kita and all that stuff. And then they made like the moves that were bad in Brawl good, like Nikita, for example.
Yeah.
And then aside from that, I think that if we had a Brawl down smash in this game, I think that'd be awesome.
That'd be crazy.
Dude, that'd be
No.
wild, bro, right? Like, dude, that was so sick.
And then finishing up, I think forward tilt like definitely got hit like one of the hardest moves for sure.
Mhm.
Like forward tilt and Brawl, war crimes. Like that move was insane.
Yeah,
But up tilt's still crazy. I actually think down tilt is way better in this game, like
yeah.
comparatively to when I like watch
Mhm.
old Brawl VODs. Like no one talks about down tilt, but that move is not okay. That move's
That move is
insane.
pretty wild and like,
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's crazy.
Aside from that, I think that in general, like relatively, I think like on paper, Brawl Snake is a better character. I think that Ultimate Snake will do better in the late meta comparatively to Brawl Snake, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I think
yeah, no, absolutely.
personally, like it feels like Ultimate Snake has more options, just like all around, because of the limiting factors of Brawl Snake, like the jump squad, like the auto shield, etc., etc. So something that I think is interesting that you mention a lot is like late meta adaptations, right? And we're heading towards the late meta. I wouldn't say we're there quite yet, but we're heading towards it. And as you mentioned yourself, like a lot of people feel like Snake cannot keep up in the late meta.
and that can be like due to his disadvantage, which is limited, or just like in general, the fact that his options are, um, I don't want to say linear, but a lot of his flexibility is through grenades, which are telegraphed, right? Like you're showing that you're going to be using grenade mix-ups. What do you feel about these weaknesses, and like what are some ways that you've been working on kind of compensating for them?
Okay, so disadvantage is valid, but whenever I play Gluto at Summit, he said that like comparatively to like snakes he's played before, that my disadvantage is like the best. And I think a big
Mm-hmm.
thing with that in this game is like C4 reverses, grenade reverses, and also like the threat of just not doing it. Like I think the mix-up tree of like, am I gonna be reverse? Am I not? Like a lot of times people can cover one, but they can't cover both. So like playing that mix-up is gonna be really important, and like being okay with landing in the corner, doing nothing just to get back to the ground, or like C4 reversing, putting the C4 there, air dodging without blowing it up. Because like right now, the mix-up is just to blow up C4. You cover yourself, you're good every time. But putting that C4 down, making them respect you, getting back to ledge. Like Alan is one who mixes that up pretty well. So it's like I think has a lot more mix in this game in terms of disadvantage. But I think at the beginning, like especially like early, where people are like Snake's disadvantage is bad, they were using like brawl options or just using like what we knew. But I think there is more room. You can drop Nikitas to cover, and sometimes like I feel like players have to get better at taking like, the lesser of two evil hits. Like in this game, sometimes you have to get hit, right? So it's like
Yeah.
you want to take the hit that's going to put you in a better position to recover, rather than taking the hit that's like going to get you killed. And I feel like that's like something that's
Yeah.
not talked about
Pick your
enough. Too.
poison.
Yeah.
Jumping in real quick, I feel like that's also like something that we can only do as of late because we understand characters better. So like beforehand, you couldn't decide what the lesser of two evil was because you didn't have the exact knowledge. And on top of that, I also feel like the stage list has just been good for Snake in that regard as well, because like you up B to the center of PS2, and then you basically have two platforms to decide between that are both safe and both give you access to center, or you just go like straight to center. And I feel like that has also just like shaped up perfectly for Snake, right?
I'm super glad you said that, because I think Hollow Bastion is Snake's best stage.
Oh, really? Hollow? Yeah, because you get a platform to land to on center. Yeah.
Get home, dude. We're calling that
true.
Shadow Moses, dude.
It's a house. It's a house.
It's definitely a house, dude.
So,
Place is crazy.
Fun fact, I VOD reviewed the last a while ago, and one of like the diagrams you might have seen on Twitter was literally drawing a house like under a platform. And it's like, this is your house. You just occupy here, because like Snake doesn't want to play in the corner when he could just crouch under a platform. That might as well be the corner for him, because he's so obnoxious to hit there.
Yeah.
But
and Hollow Bastion also gives you a lot of space too, right? It's not like it's like Smashville, but you just get more real estate. So
and the B reverse is still mixed up because the platform's so wide. Kind of going back to the original point though, what about like kind of the telegraph nature of grenades? Like I feel like there's a lot you can do with grenades to still mix up within that dynamic. But I also feel like if we're talking long term, if people adjust to your mix-ups, I also feel like at a certain point they can avoid most of the mix-ups and kind of like force you to commit harder again. What do you feel about that?
For sure. So I think one thing with grenade is you kind of have to feel people out and see how they deal with them. I think something that really helps Snake in this game is going to be Z-Nade stuff, because Snake can pull grenades. Like he can pull 2 grenades in one short hop now, and he can like use the threat of those grenades to close space. So like before in Brawl, he had to like either throw it, shield, roll, right? He was stuck to a defensive option. But in this game now, like for example, when I'm playing against Roy, if I think that Roy is going to try and swing at me, like I've done sets versus like Salt 1 and Goblin, what I'll do is I'll like Z-Nade and pull 2 nades, right? So now I'll take like the Roy forward air, but now they're eating 20% instead. So it's like nades are telegraphed, but they have more potential in this game just because of that alone, I think. And also you have like ways to cover you for using nades to where it's like not too high risk. Like if you watch the Japanese Snake players, or like Alan especially, they'll do like Z-Nade Kita, where it's like you put out Nikita and then you have grenade and shield, or you can throw it depending on like reacting to the situation at hand. And I think like once Snakes like understand how people want to play around the grenade, sometimes like it's building upon the grenade itself, right? Like the grenade itself is just there, and you kind of use the grenade as like the means to an end. Like you're like, you want to spawn like this, and then if you're unsure, like even at that point, you can reset. So I think like the big thing is like whenever people start counterplaying grenades, then you have different counterplay. Like I have to play a completely different way against people who want to catch and throw back my grenades, but I can also like set up traps specifically meant for that counterplay and get more damage, or like put them in a bad spot for doing it, depending on someone who's not going to catch the grenades. But like if I try to set up that grenade catch trap against someone who's not catching grenades, it's not going to work. So I think like that's Pardon me.
I was gonna say, have you played anyone who actually forces you to change your grenade strategies? Because I feel like most players they just have like one way that they deal with grenades, and that's what they do like the entire set.
Um, I- honestly, Gluto, like
Yeah, he's
Gluto's out there.
the Brawl
Uh,
veteran. Yeah.
so Gluto, Nico, even with like
Right.
Shulk in this game, and then
Even with Shulk,
like
even
even
with
with
Shulk.
Shout out to
Shulk,
my
you
boy.
God
know,
damn.
Juice
Qualified
baby,
low
let's
tier.
go.
That
No,
was
like,
easy. That
send the
was
curve and
easy.
gift. Send the curve and gift.
Ramses, that's all these damn dude.
Send the curve.
Not
Yeah.
like this.
Launch it.
Launch it
I'm
now.
feeling like Charles right now.
No.
The shot is here.
Can't wait to get into that section later.
No.
So I think that big thing is like they a lot of the time at top level, honestly, a lot like people know the matchup better than people think at this point. Like even if they're not like they don't counterplay everything, they just understand Snake's weaknesses as a character. Because I always
Yeah.
tell people like you're not really gonna out button Snake unless you have like like super crazy buttons, which some characters do, but it's not common. So you have to abuse the fact that like Snake has broken buttons on like a mediocre character, right? Like not the best acceleration, not the best speed. So you kind of gotta like trap him, lock him down. So it really just comes down to like what's working, what's not working. Like I'll kind of split my play into modes per se, where I have like, you know, traps that require 2 nades, 1 nade, no nades, depending on what's the most effective. And I kind of like sandbox it. Like as I'm playing someone, I'm figuring out like what works best against you, what doesn't work, why does this work, why does this not work, and then I'll like interchange traps that I think will work the best based on like the information that they've given me in game.
Oh, interesting. So when you beat Leo, the 3-0, was there anything specific that worked really well that you noticed?
That man does not like he did not respect the ledge much. Like he really wanted to get back on stage, right? So like what I would do is like at the beginning of the set, I was like, okay, I know that like you really like to whether it be like gun, tether cancel, nair, or like just a mix up, right? He really wants to get back on stage. He doesn't want to be on ledge against Snake, which is understandable because I think Snake is like a top 3 ledge trapper in the game. He's really obnoxious there. So he would like do a mix up. So at first I'm like, okay, I'm gonna let you get back on stage and see how you want to do, like see how you do it, right? I'm gonna put myself here and act like I can get reversal in the future. And then if you remember like the end of game 1 where I had like the back air into the forward air setup, like before that it was like a string into like dash attack off stage and I got a bunch of damage out of it. But it's like I think especially hitting like edge guards in that set were the thing that set me apart. So I was able to get like a rising backer on like the tether cancel because I knew at ledge he wouldn't like drop down, right? He always wanted to do something. I just had to like pick that key option. And I'm like right there, I picked that. And then because I got like his tether cancel, he's gonna like wait, see what I do, and then that's why I go for like the forward air right after, right? Because it's like I got like the check at ledge, and then right after that you send it. No time to think because he's like, all right, well my tether cancel got, but I still have these options. So it's like even if like for example he like countered, that's fine because like I'm not gonna die for that immediately. He still has to recover rather than focusing on killing me. So it's
So
like in
cool.
that situation, it was like risk reward, and I just like pulled the trigger type thing. But I think aside from that, it just came down to like I gotten better at turtling against Joker in general because of our previous sets and kind of like understanding what he was able to like latch onto and come back into with. Like taking a lot of unnecessary nade damage when he has Arsene just because gun's so big. So it's like whenever he had Arsene this time, I just didn't pull nades. I'm like, shoot me, I'll take the shots. Like you're not killing me with that. That's fine.
Traded for the timer, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that was
real
great,
quick,
man.
real quick.
Go ahead.
So AK, could you just explain to the viewers what Z grenade is?
So Z-Nade is whenever Snake is holding a grenade, usually he can light toss, which is throwing it up. He can normal toss, which is like the lob that bounces. And then he can like hard throw, which is like throwing it forward. So Z-Nade, he's able to, while holding B, press grab and jump on the same frame and able to take the item in hand. So basically the normal way you would accomplish this is to pull grenade, shield drop, press A, right? But shield drop is 11 frames. So being able to pull a grenade out of jump and already have it in your hand is 3 frames. So it basically just allows Snake to be faster as a character in a game that is like you don't want to be ran over. So it allows him to keep tempo and keep pace and honestly like just get 2 grenades out in situations a lot of the time where it would take too much time if you're playing against for example like a fast character and you don't have time to set up. It'll allow him to get more coverage out and he can do like Z-Nade into B reverse into up smash and that's already like 3 explosives if they're not already on top of it type thing. So it's just a way to make grenade pulls more efficient and a way to keep Snake like flowing fast.
Do you think it's critical to like top level Snake play at the moment?
I don't know. I think it's one of the things that has the most room for optimization. Like it has the most potential out of like his kit right now. I think it's very underexplored, and I was too stubborn to do it for a long time because I value simplicity in my play. That way, I can't miss input.
Yeah. No, I understand that. That's something I've heard from a lot of
That's fair.
folks over the years. Yeah.
I think it has a ton of room for growth because like what you can do, for example, is like you can be obnoxious, stay out of the corner, and you can like Z-nade, you can take new nade like 2 of the grenades, throw one up, you grab the other one, and you like jump, air dodge while holding it in hand, and then it blows up while you're air dodging during the lag, and then you can use that as a way to like jump air dodge back into center with the grenade explosion covering you to like regain stage. So it's like, or you can like wave land while the grenade explodes too, and like have coverage in case they try to punish you initially for the lag on that air dodge too. So there's like a lot of little stuff that I think can be like implemented and optimized to make Snake like super obnoxious.
So you're
Yeah,
essentially
I love-
dropping the grenade as you have it pulled, and then pulling another.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Mhm.
for sure. Yeah, and that way, like because you already have a grenade in hand, it drops right below you.
Right.
Like and then you can choose what to do with the next one.
Yeah.
And that allows
No,
you. To,
I mean, that's just good, man. It sounds incredible because I mean, I know that like you said, right? It really speeds up a lot of these traps before, right? Because taking so much time to be like, oh, I'm at a shield drop, pick it up, then be reversed, right? And then anyone who kind of understands the timing grenades is like, you're sitting there doing nothing. Like I could just go, I can just hit you, right? So yeah, it's nice to see that, and I think that really goes into kind of what you guys were talking about earlier on, right? In terms of late stage in the meta, where the beauty of Ultimate Snake here, as opposed to like say Brawl Snake, is because you do have a lot more of these global mechanics now, and those can be intertwined with these things with Snake, and so that allows him to, like, as people just get better, like naturally, you optimize those global mechanics, and those will always be there, right? There's always another level to them, but in tandem, your grenades fit so well into those global mechanics with the directional air dodge, with the wave lander you're talking about before, with like the C grenade. So like it's really interesting to see like how much more Snake can do and accomplish.
Oh, for sure. Also, one more point that I haven't brought up because I forget about it in game. Might as well forget about it here too, right? Crouching. Snake has the best crawl in the game, if not like top 2, if not, and he can actively move while he's crawling, and you just can't rising aerial. It's impossible. You can't do it. So it's like if he like sets up traps and crawls, especially like in certain matchups, it becomes so much harder to deal with. Like I think Joker can be one of them, but like for example against like Roy, now if I'm like crouching, you can't rising there, you can't do rising forward air. Now you have to stagger your pressure, and I'm like, oh no, I got down tilted. Like okay, that's way worse. Or that's way better than like jab bear, which then again you have to be like right on top of me because I'm crouching, so you can't scoop me with like the outer hitboxes easily anymore. You might get like the outside instead and get the weak hit. So I think like those are really gonna make him like be able to keep up and compete. I just need to like remind myself to crouch more, and all the other Snake players too.
Yeah, it's the reason why dash attack's so hard to punish, because he goes into his crouch at the later part of it. I'm actually curious, can you like dash attack and buffer crouch and just stay crouched?
Yeah, I was literally gonna say that after, and like one of the
godlike.
oh my gosh, one of the big things I do is like I'll dash attack, buffer crouch, and up tilt in the corner when people try to jump and punish. So like a lot of the time they'll try to like position to punish me like spot dodging or something, or like punish me like shielding, and then I'll just like buffer up tilt, and they're in the air because they're trying to short hop an aerial or something, and they'll just explode.
Don't you ever feel like it sounds like there's a lot that goes on when playing Snake? I mean, I know there's a lot that goes on when playing Snake. And like you said, like you need to remind yourself to crouch. You need to remind yourself to use your Z nades. How do you manage juggling, like both in terms of implementing all of these new things, but also in terms of integrating these new things? Like, how do you go about doing that? Is it just a matter of just like playing and practicing? Is it more a matter of VOD reviewing or reflecting? Like, what's your process?
All of the above.
Yeah.
So like yeah, like
Fair
I
enough.
take like it gets to a point where I'm like, if I start getting like mad if I can't remember things enough, like I'll go into like 3 tournaments and try to crouch, and I still won't crouch. I'm like, dude, and I like write down crouch and like my notes and stuff, and then like just VOD review certain instances where like crouching like literally carried me, and just kind of try to drill it in my head. But like I think that's one of the harder things about Snake is like you have certain characters like Palu will use like the same like 5 to 8 moves per matchup, where it's like you really have the core moves to focus on, when Snake has like a lot of different moves to focus on. Like some matchups you have to spam down tilt, some matchups you have to spam dash attack, some matchups you can't really dash attack at all because they'll kill you if you do it type thing. So it's like once you kind of figure that out, like past that point, it's pretty like simple to deal with. Like it's more so just to the point right now where I can just focus on the player I'm playing against. So I think that's why I like Snake, because I don't lab too much. Like I just play the game a shit ton because like I can't sit in a training room, like especially with Smash's training room. I can't sit there. I get bored. So I like to see how like people respond to my play instead. So I feel like Snake is a character that allows you to think a lot, but he's not too hard execution wise. Like the grenade confirms and stuff, like once I know how far they'll get launched at a certain percent, it's very manageable compared to a character like I don't know, Steve, where it's like even though he's broken without the tech, if you can kill people in one hit, like he's just insane. So it's like not having that execution barrier and just only relying on like mental stuff and like breaking down the other opponent's habits and how they respond. I feel like that takes a weight off my shoulder, even if Snake has to like use a lot of different moves per matchup.
So when you are essentially leaving the proverbial house and looking to aggress on your opponents, what do you recommend to other Snake players to be looking for? What for both when you're looking to do that and then also how to aggress with Snake?
Gotcha. I think Snake's a grappler. So I think Snake's buttons are insane. So a lot of the time, people are either gonna go in the air, dash back, or shield, right? So we have options for shielding to poke shield a little bit safely. Like down tilt's pretty egregious, especially if you space it. And then aside from that, if they're going in the air, you can decide whether you want to call them out right away or catch their landing. But I think the main thing that happens to a lot of Snake players is they just don't grab enough. Like even if your grab misses, you need to instill the respect that you are going to go for a grab so you can change your opponent's behavior. Like, I don't care if my grab hits you whenever we start the set. I need to understand how you respond to that because that's how my traps are going to be set up later. So what I'll do is I'll understand how my opponents respond to my buttons and grabs with grenades and without grenades. So it's just like the whole first game, like I never expect to win the first game because it's just one of those things where I need to see how my opponent is. I need to understand like are they comfortable with this? Are they comfortable with that? Because even with brawl vets, sometimes they'll have like their situations where they are just godlike, like I am not beating them. But then because they're so confident in that, I can like find a little piece of the puzzle that they're not like and set up a situation that maybe they're not as confident in it, or maybe they're not as comfortable dealing with, even though they can deal with this other setup super well. So I think like just being willing to experiment and not like getting discouraged if things don't work right away. I feel like Snake is a big trial and error character. So like I don't care if I'm down like 2-0. I don't care if it's like, 3 stocks to 1. Like I'm confident I can bring it back because I think that Snake has that X factor in his kit. So I think like just being willing to grab even if it doesn't work and like being able to assess whenever you need to do something as well is really important because sometimes I feel like Snake has good buttons like up tilt dash attack, right? But you don't always need to do them. Like sometimes you can just hold your ground and like understand how your opponent will like approach. But like if they see an up tilt opportunity, they're gonna up tilt, right? So it's one of those things where.
Oh, okay. One quick question. So what I feel like when I watch your Snake, you find pockets of aggression, right? Like you get information and then you cash out really big. You go for certain hard reads. You go for a tad bit more aggressive call outs. Like I'll see you just like double jump back air, stuff like that, right? Like usually when I view Snake, going for like a double jump aerial is pretty risky. You give up a lot of stage. You could have set up. You could have done this, that, or this. And I feel like what sets your Snake apart is there's a lot of Snakes that it's like they enter the defensive flow chart, and I feel like you learned how to play Snake the opposite direction, where you kind of focused on offensive cash out, getting information, going for like these harder reads, being a little bit more aggressive with some of your resources that are generally kind of mediocre, right? Like Snake's like jumps or aerials, his air acceleration, like we said earlier, generally not the best, right? And you have that little burst of mobility with dash attack, but I feel like you learned how to play the aggressive side of Snake, and now you're starting to come up a lot faster because you're starting to learn more of the defensive flow chart. But then you're learning like, okay, you're playing at top level. These players aren't committing, right? Like everyone's camping their ass off, right? And I mean, it's the game, right? There's nothing bad about it. It is the game,
sure.
right?
Yeah, how it goes.
Camping, reacting, reposition, react, constant flow. And I feel like what sets you apart is you do that and you have your defensive flow chart, but you're able to weave in these spikes of offense that will like surprise your opponent, or you get stocks from it, or you get like just even a hit instead of just getting like, oh, I have the center stage control, I went for this risk, got a hit, now I have ledge trap with these traps, right? So is that how it went? Because that's like me outside looking in, right? So I don't know if
Yes.
that's actually how you went about it or anything. I'm just very curious because that's what it seems like to me, at least.
So when I was coming up, I would often lose because I did not camp enough. And
Very common.
it is one of those things where I'm just like, dude, I want to fight. The reason why Snake is fun to me is because like I can do everything, but most importantly, like, dude, it's so satisfying to hit his normals. Like they sound so satisfying to hit. Like every
Yeah,
time you forward
they
tilt
do.
one through someone, you're like, oh, and I'm just like, let's go, dude. So even though it's only like 14%, doesn't even take the stock, but I feel great. I feel excellent, like super big rush of dopamine. But so one of the things that like held me back for a while is like I would just be too aggressive and like lose stocks for it super easily. So I kind of I like super went hard at that because I was like, if I'm aggressive and can understand how people respond to my aggression with a character that's not typically seen as like, can be played that way, then like I can add in defense later because all the other, like most of the other snakes are being defensive anyway, right? Like I can find footage of that. I can find that all over. Feeling out whenever people want to think that you're going to be defensive or like aren't expecting you to go in. Like I think that's one of the things that I scout for the hardest because it like you can't do both. You're not going to be able to stuff out like me defensively and my aggression. So I try to make it as like ambiguous or confusing as possible to know what I'm going to do with it. And sometimes it like backfires, but I feel like, that's the same for everything. Like nothing is perfect. So it's like, if that happens, that happens, but it doesn't matter like what point, as long as you get like the adjustment you need for the player you're playing against. And sometimes like it's going to happen in the first 30 seconds. Sometimes it happens in the last minute of the game, right? You just need to like keep an eye out for that opportunity. So I just really wanted to make sure that like looking for those openings is how I enjoy the game the most. Like those are when I'm having the most fun, is when I can like open someone up and like, kill them for it or just get a huge amount of damage off of it. So I try to like, set it up. Maybe I'll like get hit by things on purpose to make people feel comfortable doing them and then like get that situation set up later and kill them for it. Because it's like, as long as I'm taking hits that don't put me in an edge guard situation, I'm fine. Because like that's whenever Snake is like struggling, is whenever characters are trying to edge guard him, catch his landing, they fall with him, smash stack him. So if I can get hit in ways, like if I do have to like take a hit on based on what they did, like I didn't expect it, I'd rather take a hit that launches me across the stage if I have them in like a bad spot, rather than like them hitting me and edge guarding me off stage. Like it basically lesser of two evils type thing. But I think like the main thing is like being able to dial it back has definitely helped a ton. And I think like the biggest, like going back to what we said about like the recent changes that happened in the play, right? I think that one thing is like sticking to the game plan regardless of if like a good or bad thing happens, because sometimes like an interaction could happen and players can like flip a switch, but it's like with a character like Snake and what he wants to do, it doesn't matter if like you lose an interaction, you can't lose confidence. You have to stick to your guns in the way that you're playing. So like that's kind of what I've full sent, is like full confidence in my defense and offense regardless of if I just lost the last interaction or not. But I'd say like how you described it is pretty accurate. With like I experimented with aggression first and then kind of added in defense later because aggression is more fun to me.
I think, ironically enough, in at top level play, what you notice is that the more solid the defense is, the more accurate the aggression is. So the way I visualize it is like, if you play defensive properly, you only open a few avenues for your opponent to interact with you. And because there are so few avenues, it becomes easier to read what they do, and it becomes easier to get that like big reward. And I think especially for Snake, like he kind of embodies that, right? Because like his keep away is like one of the most like limiting um game plans that you can find in the game, as in like there's only so many ways they can accurately interact with like a proper defensive grenade setup, and the reward he gets off of those callouts is just absolutely insane. It just all kind of comes down to making that switch at the right moment, and then it's less about like, oh, should I play defensive or should I play or let me rephrase that, it's less about how should I play offensive or how should I play aggressive. It's more about, should I play aggressive or should I play offensive. And I think especially for Snake, it's hard. And I actually talked about this with some of my Snake students as well, because he has so many tools. It's easy to solve every single situation within the realm of playing aggressive, or to solve every single situation within the realm of playing defensive. where it might just be more effective to do it with another style, but you can also stay within the style and kind of like stay comfortable. So a lot of the improvement for Snake comes down. Well, I mean, kind of going back to what we talked about at the beginning, right? Like in the current meta, you cannot play it safe. You gotta push, you gotta optimize.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, again, like you've done a really good job. I just wanted to like highlight that because I think the nuance of that is like it applies to every character, so anyone watching it can learn a lot from just that perspective.
Yeah, man.
Going forward, how do you think that cashing out on those reads should be balanced with preventing your opponent from finding openings? Or rather, how do you think it should be balanced for Snake players to avoid giving those openings while also cashing out on the information you've collected?
So I think that a big thing going forward will be to assess risk and reward, especially because sometimes like you have to figure out like what do they want, like what kind of situation do they want to put me in? Because it's like depending on the player or the character you're playing against, they're gonna want to put you somewhere or like look for a certain confirm, and it's like even though a character like Fox has like up smash, forward smash, and down smash, if they're only looking for up smash, you can be more comfortable, being in front of them or, not having to worry about that until they show their hand. So I feel like it's more so like only worry about what's in front of you until like the information is presented because you can't prevent everything. But if you like focus in on a few tools that they're trying to use, you can prevent it pretty well. So I think overall, like, don't be afraid to like lose interactions to gather information, but try and make those interactions that you lose like as least bad as possible, honestly. Like just not don't die for it if you can help it. Like honestly, a big thing with me is like sometimes I get the shit beat out of me for a stock. Like it happens. Like sometimes I'll go from like 0 to 130, but it's like if I don't die, I'm fine. Because like I'm only one grenade confirm away from like cheesing you. Get forward air, get F smash. So it's like one of those things where it's like as long as I don't lose that stock, like this is even. So I think like a big thing is it's going to come down to like against that player, what is going to be like their X factor, what is going to be there when they charge a smash attack, waiting for you to press the button. Like you figure out those and do whatever you have to do to get there, and the balance will like present itself within the set. Because I feel like that question is hard to answer like generally, but I think it's going to change depending on like the player you're playing against. So I think like the best thing that Snakes can do in that regard is just to like work on their assessment of it, right? Work on how they get that information and trying to make it as accurate and like as reliable as possible. Because we are only human, right? We're not going to be right all the time, but we're just trying to make the most educated guesses as possible type thing.
No, it definitely makes sense there, dude. And I know we talked about this a little bit already, but like, yeah, it was really incredible to see your edge guarding overall. Especially obviously against Leo. I always remember you kind of running off and with that double jump nair, you get like clipped him early on, right? And it was like just one of those situations, right, where I think one of the great things to see from you is that there's always certain things in game that we tend to just respect because we're like, no one's gonna come out here or no one's gonna do anything here. Like I should just have this. It's like almost like a gentleman's agreement, right? Like okay, it's early on. I'm gonna go for recovery here and it should be fine, right? Because obviously I should not die at early percent. That's just how things go. So you're gonna let me go. You're gonna sit up on stage and we're gonna play the good man's game, right? And I love that you are someone who like challenges that consistently, right? In a lot of situations that makes people really be like, wait a minute, am I really safe here? Or do people just let me go all the time? And like and I feel like you're really good at being like, if you let it go, it's gonna get like when I watch you play, I just assume like, okay, he's waiting for something. He's waiting to cash out on it, right? Or you'll just go like, I'm going for the early cash out. I think this is something very basic. I've seen from you already. I'm going for it, right? And then you hit and just you're just sniping these double jumps. Next thing you know, someone's dying at like 20 to 30%. And I think that's the thing that makes you a scary player alongside like the power of Snake. But yeah, man, that was just like so good to watch all those times because it really got people to be like, oh wait, he's not giving this to me for free. He will challenge me here. If he sees something, he will challenge me here. And I think sometimes there's players like even like on the top level like this, they won't, right? Because they're just like, oh well, there's just no need for that. And I think obviously for someone who always has traditionally started off as an aggressive player, it's great because over time I'm sure you've been able to catch wins of like kind of those tempo changes from people and the certain mentality they have in these certain circumstances, and you're able to key in on that. in ways that sometimes most people will not go through, because they'll start the game and see everyone playing defensively, or they'll play aggressively, back when they're, young blood, new in this Smash scene, and then they get smacked up a couple times by defense, and it's like, yeah, I'm never doing that again, right? But you're like one of the people who kind of really push through and continue to push that style while making sure that you were eventually adding on that defensive component as well. So just hats off to you in that way, because I love to see that kind of play style, because it just really shakes people up and makes them recognize what really is safe and what isn't.
I'd like to build on that because I think it's a very interesting perspective. So,
Disciplined offense?
well, yes, more so the information gathering behind disciplined offense, because as Bam said, there's sort of like a gentleman's agreement on some things, like we don't punish that. And part of that is because, well, it requires a lot of reads to punish it, right? Like, for example, would you be able to read the way that Leo jumps around the ledge if you hadn't done VOD review beforehand? And now, of course, maybe you could have, but you get what I mean, right? Like that requires a few reads just to make a single punish happen. And then at tournaments, the reason people generally don't do it is because there are other things that require your attention that you're going to be focusing on. So as someone who focuses on mixing in those like flashes of rewarding aggression, how do you manage your focus? Because I feel like just to play proper defensive Snake, you already have to like kind of hyper focus on very minute details all the time. Like you said yourself, like sometimes you'll just go like an entire game getting beaten up, and that's because like, and this is for the viewers, like if you play a character with as many variables as Snake, you're gonna have to test situations with the various variables. So like ApolloKage said, right? Like how do they react to grabs with no nades, with one nade, with two nades? That's like 3 times the information than like Joker trying to grab you. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of just like information gathering just related to like neutral, playing defensive, just like your standard game plan. Honestly, that could like that could require all your attention, but still, regardless, you find these moments where you just like full hop, double jump back air, and someone dies at 80. How do you decide where your focus should be, where your information gathering should be directed to?
So I do not pull grenades if they do not have a purpose or reason. So whenever I pull a grenade or place it or use it, that reason is already out there and I'm already thinking about something else. Like if that grenade works, I can understand why or why it doesn't work. And because I had a reason for pulling it, that is why. And it's like a check system in my brain. And Snake is like, I as a person, I tended to overthink before. So Snake is like a character that loves that. He literally does that. So it's just like, this is already up my alley. So how I'll do it is, a lot of the time it'll depend on the character, what percent they're at, what can I get if I hit it, because obviously like you said, right, there's a little bit of risk to it, but it's like I'm not afraid to take risks. If you're afraid to take risks, there would be moments that you can't capitalize on. So I think like to win it all, you have to risk. Like sometimes you, like, even if you're wrong, cool, it doesn't matter. Like if you're playing too safe, that is a thing that like some players at like top level even have suffered from before. So it's like I'd rather be like in those situations, I'd rather be confidently wrong than, not go for it and then also like mess up the situation. So now not only is my confidence shot, but I also didn't get the opening that I could have got before. I'll take 1 out of 2 instead of 0 out of 2. So I think like the big thing here is like with Snake, since I already know what my grenade is gonna do, I can choose how cluttered I make the stage. Like I have the ability to set up 2 grenades, 1 grenade, or no grenades. And if I'm feeling overwhelmed and neutral, I can return to, like you said, that Joker style, but it's not pulling grenades, right? So it's like, yes, at times it can get like hectic, but it's not like it has to be hectic. I really like the freedom that Snake gives you, that when you're able to just like, not pull anything at all or just focus straight on boxing, straight on parrying. I also think that like parrying along with like grenade setups is like one of the things that when optimized, Snake is going to become even better, is because I think he has like a top 3 top 5 parry game in the whole game. Like frame 3 jab, frame 4 forward tilt, frame 6 up and down, frame 5 dash attack. So those are all insane out of parry because you chop out 3 frames. But aside from that, getting back on track, I think the main thing is I have certain setups for certain characters that I know are like hard to deal with just from playing a ton. But I think in tournament especially, like I am a person like I think tournament helps me a ton. Like I'm the most comfortable when I'm in a tournament. Like I'm uncomfortable leading up to the tournament set, and then I sit down to play and I feel nothing. Like I'm just comforting because I don't have to think about anything else. I can use all my brain on the tournament set and nothing else matters other than like until after the set's over, right? So it's like being able to use all of my attention at that moment. I can like handle it. What's like maybe it's repetition, maybe it's comfortability, but I think like there is a certain point where you're able to reach like stamina levels to where you can play for a long tournament set or you can play for like consecutive sets while setting up the adequate amount of traps and grenades just as long as you don't overdo it. Like I think like that's something that can be like super hard like comparing like MVD's style, right? He has a lot of grenade setups going on. I'm just like my brain does not like work long enough for that. You know what I mean? Like I cannot set up that many calculated traps, so it's like I got some setups, but I'm more focused on like how I can intertwine like Snake's boxing game with the grenades because that means I can think less and I just focus on whiff punishing my opponent. But it's like if that's not working, then I can switch to like the 2 nade setups or like the super calculated ones. But it's like I also understand that takes a lot of mental energy, right? So if I want to go far in like a long tournament, you gotta kind of be like resourceful with it. So I think playing a lot definitely helps, but it's one of those things where it's like I make sure to sleep for like 7 to 8 hours a night. I try to eat like fruit and good breakfast on those days. I'm always caffeinated. So I'm just like trying to treat my body and mind right outside of the game so there's no outside interruptions, right? Because it's like if you get bad sleep in an event, you're fucked. No one talks about that. But like they're like taking care of yourself outside of the game makes bracket runs so much easier.
Yeah, this game
Have
is
you
very taxing. Yeah.
have you ever lost a tournament set because you felt like someone pushed you to rely on complex gameplay too much, and that made you run out of steam later?
It's a good question. I don't think maybe, but I wouldn't have looked at it like that. If
Okay,
that
that's
makes
fair.
sense. Like
No, that's fair. Yeah.
yeah, it might have happened, but I wouldn't have been just like, oh, I ran out of stamina. I probably just would have been like, I lost because of this interaction, this interaction.
Mhm.
Maybe if I had more stamina, I'd play those interactions differently. But like, I think that's definitely a possibility, especially at like some majors. But like, um, in general, I haven't like had a moment where I went aha and recognized it as that. But I don't think it'd be like crazy to say that's happened before.
That's fair. I think it's
I
interesting.
think I think that you bring up a very interesting point in the way you are using language there. How personalized would you say that you take the results of a game? Like, how much of that is you being good, your opponent being bad, et cetera, et cetera? Like, do you think that you are better or worse off based on the result screen? It's that kind of
Oh,
sentiment.
I just it's one of those things where I assess what happened in the game, right? And with me, I tend to look at losses as something to learn from because when I played MOBAs before, I would like be toxic and I would be a rager. Like I'd lose like an ADC 1v1. I'd be like, dude, my opponent's so dog shit. Like you had to have this jungler gank you. Like you suck. But it's like
Yeah.
I plateaued super hard in Smite, right? And it's like I was like, Like at the beginning of Smash, I was a Luigi player, and because he's my favorite Nintendo character, and I was like, wow, I think my character sucks. I can't do the 0 to death, and I'm just dying sometimes because I misfire or I get like footstooled or gunned by Joker. So it's one of those things where, um, after I dropped Luigi, Snake was like an annoying secondary I couldn't drop. I tried him in a friendly and I saw like Pound where there's like a million Snake players in top 16. So I'm like, wow, there's like 5 different styles of Snake all in the same tournament, all making like winners. This character's broken. So after like that happened, I like tried to drop him 4 times. And then I played like solo Snake at a tournament for the first time, like when I was like not like getting right outside of top 8 with Luigi, like 9th and 13th. And at that tournament, I got second with Snake. And I was like, something clicked here. Like, I don't know what's going on. So I just kind of ran with Snake. And then I went to like another like 50-man local and got 4th. And I was like, all right, well, I see you, Luigi. And here we are today. But it's like, it's one of those things where I think that Snake himself is good enough, like in my head, to where I don't lose because of him. So I never like my goal was to pick up a character where I could never look at the screen and be like, I lose because character. Like even with Mega Man, like I recently fought MPG this weekend at Battle for the South and I took the set, but like if you look up my other sets with Mega Man, I got 3-0'd by I got 3-0'd by God I Miss Her, I got 3-0'd by Scat. So it's like against Mega Man's like I get bodied, but it's like I still would think that Snake could do it. Like regardless of like, this matchup's tough, it's not Snake's fault that I lose. I didn't put this much time into a character that I thought would have that issue because that's what I felt with Luigi. And I feel like having that issue is one of the hardest barriers to overcome for having a good mentality in this game because there's just so much going on. There's just so much BS to deal with. So it's like if you can't even have that full faith in your character, like what do you have to start with? So I most of the time I try to look at it as my opponent playing well rather than me playing bad. And I try to just, I take like 5 to 10 minutes to get over a loss because we're all passionate people. You can't just be like, oh, wow, I live in a perfect world. I lose and I don't feel bad at all. Like, yeah, I feel bad sometimes. Like, I feel sad. I feel frustrated, but that's just like normal. So my idea was just to make that time less and less, right? Because if I spend an hour on it, I can cut that down to about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I can focus more on what I need to do better to make sure that loss screen doesn't come up again.
Oh, I was gonna ask what is the main difference in your approach to winning and losing, or to the process of losing, I should say, that let you reduce the time that you spend on all.
So a big one was I used to be like, oh dude, I'm so disappointed in my play. I played so poorly, and I'm just like, if I give credit to the other person, not only am I uplifting someone else, but I'm also making myself look better because it's not like I played terribly, they just played well, right? So I lost to someone who's good. I lost to someone who's good at like the matchup at the game, right? So you're putting someone, giving them a title that's respectable, so it makes a loss more respectable on top of not getting down on yourself because you lost. So I think a combination of those two definitely like was key for it. And like the way I look at Ultimate in general, like the grand scheme of things, right? Like end game, let's skip all the way to there. So I feel like Ultimate is like a dictionary, and learning all the matchups and like the intricate interactions, you're like filling out your dictionary, right? You're filling out the pages for each character, and eventually you're going to reach a point where every page is filled out with all of the information. And at that point, if you lose, you got outplayed. You can't get mad about that. Like if you get outplayed, you lose when both players have access to all the information. You just got to focus on what you can do better next time. Because like if you get outplayed and get mad, like that doesn't make you better. But being able to focus on like the interactions that are key, or like the certain mix-ups that they were able to use to open you up, and getting better at dismantling those instead, that will help you improve. So it's just like focusing on my long-term goals over the short-term satisfaction of being like, wow, this sucks, like I feel like terrible. So it's just like reducing that learning, because being able to learn faster is going to be the thing that helps me reach my ultimate goal in the long run.
I love that.
Something that I notice among my students is that a lot of them, kind of what Tony was hinting at, is like they use Smash as a way to validate themselves, right? It's like I wanna do this, and if I lose, that means that I am not good enough at doing this, and that is like like that is a very personal thing, and something that I've that I recommend them is always to say, well, you should kind of like detach yourself from the outcome of the match, because a match does not accurately represent who you are or even your skill level. It's just like it's a very contextual result that you get. And when you follow that path, you get to a point where, just like you get a very like analytical approach. You're just like, okay, this is what I did wrong, this is what I want to work on. But then like the issue with a lot of people who go down that path is that they kind of lose the passion. And in a lot of ways, if you look at a lot of the top level players, um there's some toxicity in that mindset, right? Think about like a Riddles who gets frustrated when he loses, or a Zombo who gets frustrated when he loses, and that's very understandable, right? Like there's like, I'm not saying toxic towards others, it's toxic towards yourself.
Sure.
But there's also like motivation in there. Like when losing really really stings, then you go back home and you hit the sticks, right? You go super hard on the grind. So how do you balance that, like put like giving your all like on a personal level to the game without letting the negative results reflect badly on you?
So I have been like playing in competitive esports environments for like 8 to 9 years now. Like in terms of just like I wasn't a pro until Smite, but I played like Call of Duty for like 3 to 4 years and like
How old
watched
are
pro
you?
stuff. I'm
Okay.
21.
Okay, dang.
Yeah.
All right.
So but before that it was just like Nintendo games, and then my sister got a PS3. I played Call of Duty, and then after that I was like Call of Duty, Minecraft, and then Smite, and then Smash. So the big thing is, right, like for me, I feel like everyone's different, right? So what worked for me is not going to work for everyone, but for me it was a bunch of trial and error. Like I figured out what my mind best responded to, and I would like take that, and then I would like whenever I came to Smash, especially because my brother Quilly got me into Smash. So it was one of those things where I was like, okay, I really want to be good at this and figure it out. And he was like number one in the PR at the time. So I was able to like figure out my mentality stuff while having him show me the game. So I just like took what I did in like those previous games and what worked and what didn't, and like basically made a sort of like a mental map of what worked best for me, like what kept the passion alive. Like for example, I still, my passion is alive with Smash because I burned out with Smite. I've experienced burnout firsthand with other games. So I made sure to have, I have days where I don't play Smash at all, but if I'm not playing Smash, I'll VOD review it. And if not, then I'll just have a day where I'm completely Smash free. And then the next day I come back, I'm like, dude, I want to go to a local. Because it's like, as long as you keep that passion healthy and balanced, and I'm not going to go to tournaments for 7 days in a week. That sounds like torture if you do it for more than like 2 months. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's one of those things where you have to find the balance for you. You have to find, what keeps you motivated, what keeps you going, like, why are you doing this? Because for me, for example, right, I wanted to be the best Snake in the world. That was my motivation for like the first couple of years I've been playing. So like whenever I reached around the point where I'm like in the discussion for it, I was like, I can take this further, I guess. Like, okay. Like I got ranked top 20. So like my goal before that, like, was like top 50. And then before that was like top 100. Because like I could be like, dude, I want to be the best player in the world. But I'm more of a believer in like baby steps. Like I think that it's more realistic to shoot for top 100 and then top 50 and then, top 25 and then top 15, top 10, top 5, right? Because it's like that's way more attainable and way closer than top 1. Because it's like if I go from like 20th to like 9th, if I'm trying to be top 1, then I'm not going to be satisfied with that. And I think that's silly. I think like a really important part of like the grind and the journey that people need to like recognize is that you have to be willing to like sometimes take a deep breath, look behind you and see how far you come and like pat yourself on the back. Because it's like at that point, you have worked hard for it. It's something that you put a lot of passion, time, and energy into. So it's like, don't be afraid to just be like, hey, I did that. Even if it's not where I want to end up, it's not my end goal. It's good to like congratulate yourself, get yourself, hype yourself up a little bit. Like as long as it doesn't get out of hand, right? Like a little bit balance is key. But I think like that's a super important part. So it just kind of transitioned from like I want to be the best Snake I can be to I want to be the best player I can be.
Yeah,
I know.
that's amazing.
For me personally, you popped up on my radar as a player to keep an eye on. After it wasn't the first time. The first time I was just like, oh, that's nice. But there was a second player that I had actually worked with to help prepare for you specifically, and they beat you in bracket. And I was talking to them on probably just a Discord call, and in both cases, they like within the same hour after the match had been up, you were already up to them asking them in person if they could run back some games so that you could get more experience. And I was like, yeah, he's definitely going to keep going.
Yeah,
for
no,
sure.
that's amazing, man. Because I mean, I think that a lot of times you see players who like are rising stars, and then you always think like, all right, a lot of them they have these very strict goals, right? Even like how you're compartmentalizing your goals, right? Where you have it where like you understand that it is baby steps. You're understanding that these are steps to a greater goal, right? And looking at it and what specifically works for your mind. And you said the trial and error, right? Rebuilding yourself in that way. And I think that's really important because again, a lot of these players will be rising stars and then they'll hit a wall and they haven't done that. They have not dove into that mental aspect enough, right? On that level in terms of themselves and dealing with that frustration. Sometimes people just have potential and they go to a certain point, and then also when that potential like isn't enough, or that sheer kind of like talent in that way and kind of playing that schema of thinking just doesn't work there, they just tank, right? And it takes a while for them to really get out of that. But I think that the interesting thing about you is because of your how you've been focused on your mindset from the jump, you really can see how you've continued to rise and continue to rise and continue to rise and continue to rise. And like a while, whereas sometimes a lot of people they'll get stuck at top 100 or top 50 for a little while, right? And it really takes a paradigm shift, as it were, to really get them to like, okay, this is what I need to do. And sometimes it's like, yeah, it's going to be like little things in their gameplay, but also it's like having this certain mentality, right? And really just like, really just recalibrating that, as it were. because a lot of times these players just like something happens, like, oh my god, it's the worst and ever. So, it's crazy because like obviously, your overall gameplay and your game plan is amazing, but like, yeah, I truly feel that you are one of the best like players out there, like obviously period, but then also it's like your mentality is just like so ahead of a lot of people, and I think that allows you the capacity to go so much further, right? So it's been really a pleasure to see for me, like personally, just as like someone with that kind of mentality and that focus, right, and that understanding, and also that humility, right? Like you said, you'll see some people. I'm not gonna name any names, but they're like, "Oh, dude, I'm just the worst trash in the world. Let me spam on Twitter and everybody's I hate life because this is all darkness."
I hear people go like, "I'm garbage." I'm like, with that mindset, like if don't will it into existence, like
right.
like
Yeah, no,
anyway.
absolutely. It's like, like what does that really do for you, right? To get to the next step. And how do we accept the feelings? Like it's okay to be frustrated about little things here and there, but it's like, all right, then you take that, take it in an account, and then we get back to the drawing board, right? Take what you need to take from that moment and you move forward. You don't drag, all this past anxiety and all these terrible things alongside you because it weighs you down. And I feel like you see that, both in just talking with you, but also in your gameplay. And it's really refreshing to see that. And I think that also allows you to even attribute more of your mental faculties to reading your opponent, because you're like, again, you're not someone who's going to sit there and be weighted by the past actions, which happens for a lot of players. I think a lot of times, especially for like mid-level and high level, it's like a moment happens and you're just like, oh fuck, I can't believe I'm the worst, this is terrible trash, and they cannot let that moment go, right? And it consumes them entirely, and then all of a sudden you can't read anything because you're too focused on that damn thing that already happened, right? So yeah, all that to say that your mentality is godlike, man. I really love seeing it in play, and I think that it's exemplary for a lot of people. And I do hope that a lot of players are not just looking at your gameplay, as great as it is, but also looking on how you've been really pushing yourself mentally.
Don't look at Snake gameplay.
Don't look at Snake gameplay.
Don't look at Snake gameplay.
Don't look at him.
Don't do it, man.
It's too dangerous.
To build on that a little bit, like I don't know, I like even to this day, I will at some events like after brackets, I'll just be like, I didn't even expect to be here for real. Like
just happy to be here, dude.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
The best mentality, dude. Happy to be here. I love
it. I was like the grind, the process. Sometimes it takes like 6 to 7 years. Like the pandemic took away like a year and a half of not traveling to like offline majors. So like my first major was SmashCon 2019. And I got 513th. And one of my biggest like proud moments is you fast forward 2 years later to 2021 and I got 13th.
Yeah.
So like just being able to do something like that, and then it's just like I'm like 3.5, almost like around 4 years total into this. Like, so it's like I got here faster than a lot of other players. So like to be honest with you, I was not expecting to hit this like until a lot later on in my like play. So the fact that I'm here, I'm just like, well, this is cool. I guess I'll keep doing what I'm doing. It's something's working.
Go. Random dub.
Yeah, right. Like
earlier dub.
Random. Come on, man. Don't do him like that. Don't do him like that.
I see
He's spamming. He's spamming.
No, there we go. Enough is enough. You know exactly.
I had to call it out. I had to call it out.
I know. The moment I said it, I was gonna come out of your mouth, dude.
Me no speak English. I'm sorry, bro.
But I love how AK kind of described the process of his mentality, and I think a lot of players should put more effort into it. Whereas in like if you're getting frustrated or something else is happening, and it like trying to target those moments and just being like, oh, I don't play while I feel X or Y. Why do I feel X or Y? Right. And trying to really break down what environments you play well in, even just hearing AK like, okay, like I want sleep, healthy breakfast. Like these are things that I can control that could affect or that affect my play, right? And even going back to AK's like earlier experience through other games and figuring out how he plays depending on what his emotions are in the game, right? And kind of streamlining the mental bandwidth is a very important thing. I know Bam was talking about kind of like streamlining that mental bandwidth. And if you're not frustrated about specific things, you can put more mental energy into, all the other stuff that takes playing Ultimate. Ultimate's a very straining game. And I can definitely relate to that because I recently started competing in Ultimate, and again, it's been like a long time, but the game's really frustrating to me. It's like really hard because Fighter Pass 2 is nothing like I've ever fought in my life, and I've played Smash since like '08, right, competitively. So Fighter Pass 2 is some shit. So even like the last tournament I competed at KoiCon, my main goal was just not to get mad while I played the game. I put so much into that, and just taking it one step at a time, because that sounds so simple and easy to do, but it just depends on the type of person you are and what pisses you off about the game, right? Some people, like zoners, will piss them off. Other people, like maybe fighting game characters, will piss them off, right? So taking that and dissecting your own emotions and really understanding yourself and understanding what conditions have to be met, like what check marks have to be met for yourself to play the best that you can play, right? And that is something that's not even in the game. And then you also have to like obviously learn the game and all this other stuff. But I think understanding that there's a whole nother process outside of the game that you have to refine and learn about yourself. And honestly, to me, that's like the best part about competing, because if you learn how to do that kind of stuff, whether you're successful or not in the world of competition, you can take all of that and what you've learned and apply it to like everything else in life, no matter what you do.
Life skill.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's really interesting hearing your journey throughout multiple games and kind of how you dissected your own emotions and how you dissected and figured out what conditions you play well in and how to kind of balance. And even Ramses' question was really important, because I've seen extremes of both sides. I've seen like people that play off of raw emotions, only emotions. They don't want to learn the game. They're just like in the game and they play. And I've seen people be successful with that. And I've also seen people like get consumed by that. And then I've also seen players where they have no emotion, but then because they have no emotion in the game, they don't have like the passion to keep going. It's like kind of like a side thing. They'll play, they're really, really successful. I'm like, man, this player could be so good. But they just get done with their college degree and then they move on because the passion wasn't there, right? So I feel like you found a really good sweet spot for yourself, and that took a long time to figure out. But it was a process that you were down to commit to, and the whole process of just like learning about yourself and building upon that.
Oh, for sure. And I like what you said about like entering the tournament with like one goal in mind to like not get frustrated, because I think that's a really efficient way to practice. Like for me, for example, whenever I was like first learning Snake, I would like go to a local and I'd be like, I want to down tilt better today. Didn't matter how I did, didn't matter the wins I got, as long as I felt like I down tilted better that day, that was a win. So like I think that can be applied in game and out of game, like you said, right? Like with just focusing on not getting tilted, because you know that like, gameplay wise, you're gonna be fine, you'll be able to work it out. But if you can like really conquer that mental part, like it'll set you up for good for the future. So I think like because of how like at least my brain works, or just like the human mind in general, being able to like take a big picture and break it down into like simple small pieces to focus on in depthly, and not like overwhelm ourselves and try to do everything well, and like instead of just like taking one piece and building it. It's like a body part, right? So you're like this body part today, this body part, this body part, and you're like building a person type thing. So I think like just being able to focus on one part or one aspect and build that up to where you're like, okay, good, I did this better. So even if I, like we said earlier, like people will attach their worth to like the win screen, but it doesn't matter if you win or lose with that mentality, because as long as you're doing what you want to do better, you're accomplishing a goal, you're feeling good, the result isn't what you're thinking about. And then along with that, your gameplay or mentality or whatever you're focusing on is improving at that point too.
Now, you mentioned that part of your personal shift and mentality was, if I understood it correctly, you coming face to face with a version of yourself that you didn't really like. Do you feel that that was a necessary catalyst for you? Or do you think that someone else looking to make that change for themselves can find a quicker way to get there? Or a
So
different
for
way?
me, like I think it was a bit of that like after the interaction would happen, but the main thing for me is like I did that before, and I like saw like I got to a certain point in Smite, and I just like even though I played the game for like a year after that, I just never really got better. And I was like, well, what was the common trend along with that? And I noticed that mentality coming back into Smash. So I was like, well, this is like a two birds with one stone situation. So what if I flip that on its head? What if I go the other route? And the other route is kind of how I started on this journey to like build this. And I'd say like, um, to the people who are struggling with that, just know that like that's hard. Like that is understandable and it's nothing to feel like truly bad about, especially if you want to improve upon it because half of the battle is awareness. That's a phrase I always say because like to start like getting better at something, you have to be aware of it. And that's like once you're aware of it, that's half the battle, right? You're like, okay, I want to take a step in the right direction. That's a good way. That's a good point to stop or not stop, start. My fault.
There's a term for that in medical science called awareness precedes control. So you need to be aware of something to control it. Yeah,
Yep.
that's really cool.
All right. Okay. Well, I just learned something new today. Let's go. I did not know it's called that. Okay, so and I think like past that point, right? The thing that aha'd it for me is like I said before, I try to break it down and like the now versus the later, right? So I have like if you're competing in Smash as a competitor, whatever you're doing, generally you have a goal that motivates you and that you want to work towards, right? So you can kind of like break it into a situation now and a situation later, right? Maybe the situation now is better to like assess immediately or later, depending on the type of person you are. But I just tried to like break it down and be like, what gets me the closest to my long term goal and what, just feels good in the moment but doesn't help me at all. So like being able to realize that allowed me to understand that like in order to reach my long-term goal faster and like achieve what my true like want is in that situation versus like the short term, getting this frustration off, I feel good, but it's like it's not helping me type thing. Like channeling a healthy way to like kind of like cut off time. Like the thing is, I feel like a lot of the time people will just be like, "Oh yeah, just don't get mad," right? But that's not normal. Like you have to kind of like manage it like bit by bit, like piece by piece. It's like when you build stamina, you go like little by little, you get stronger and stronger, and it's like an process that's ongoing, and you're not gonna make like gains immediately. You're not gonna immediately run a mile in like 6 minutes, but if you keep working at it, it gets a little easier every day. So as long as you keep doing it and keep doing it, by the end of 6 months, you're probably gonna be in a better spot with it than when you started. So I think just like consistently like reminding yourself of that, especially if the situation that makes this happen arises frequently, is super important. And just like having faith in yourself that you can do it. Because if you don't believe in yourself, then who will?
Amen.
So, yeah,
Amen
that's
to
kind
that,
of
man. Facts.
that's like a big thing with me because I'm like super confident in like what I do in myself because I'm like I got confidence that even if things don't go my way or don't go wrong, like I'll figure out how to fix it, right? It's like the world isn't over because it didn't work out when I can, put my brain to the test and then figure out a solution instead. So it just helps being able to have that like wall of yourself that even if it doesn't go your way like you want it to, you've got the ability to turn it on its head and then just, rebuild from there.
Hell yeah, man. That's the kind of vigilante I need, bro.
No, are we transitioning into that?
Don't hit him! Don't hit him like
that's
that!
a good topic.
For the around the horde.
Yeah, I think it's a good topic to end it off on. Unless you guys had any more questions.
Final statements, anyone?
Yeah, final statements.
I had one last one. So I think this has been a bit of a Twitter conversation. Is specifically your relationship and improvement, and also where you live, Missouri. It's not quite as strong as say Mexico or Japan as a region, but you still manage to keep up on the same competitive performance as the Snake players from those regions. How would you say that coming from a less populous, less top-heavy region has affected your growth as a competitor, and how do you deal with that?
I think my scene is slept on, honestly. So I think that I have good players here that test me. Like I've lost I lost a local a couple weeks ago here. So it's like I'm still able to like go out in top 8 majors and come home and get like second or fourth at a local. So it's like that's nice to have. But I think the main thing is like you've got to work with what you have as at least from my perspective because it's like yes I could live in New York and all that stuff and then have like godlike practice but it's like if you really want it then you have to make the most of what you have. You can't focus on what's not there. You have to focus on what's in front of you and work with it. Like I've played top players online all the time which isn't as like much of quality as practice as offline but it's like that's just unfortunate that it's like even if I'm like, oh my god, this is so unfortunate. If I lived in a better region, I'd be so much better. That's not productive. I really like focus on what I consider a productive and unproductive thought. So I've really channeled my brain into like getting rid of unproductive thoughts as fast as possible and like focusing on productive ones, because long-term goal, like I said before, it's going to help me reach that. So I think it's something that I don't personally, if you ask me, I don't think I'm nerfed by that, because I don't consider it a factor. I think that like I can still travel to these tournaments and get like as good as the best players in the world, because now I'm like up there with them. You know what I mean? And I was able to do it regardless of my region, because it's like I'm not going to use that as a crutch. I don't need a fallback excuse for if like things don't work out my way. I'll grind through it. I'll get better. I'll do it. I don't care where my like region is. That's kind of how I feel about it, right? It was never like a, you know, what if I was in a better region, because I just never gave thought to that.
Good way to think about it. Yeah.
Maximize your strengths, not focus on your weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, literally.
Yep. I do have a final thing that I think is interesting. Not a question, actually more of a statement. I think something that came up time and time again in our discussion with ApolloKage is choices. And I think if anything, like the viewers at home can take away, like you gotta make as many choices, right? So when we talked about game plan, ApolloKage was like, yeah, I decide to focus less on complex nade traps to focus more on aggression. Whereas MVD focuses more on the nade traps. Like those are both valid ways to play, but you got to be able to decide when you do which and why you do those things. When we talked about information, right, which is like the next layer, he talked about, well, I focus on like these pieces of information in this situation, et cetera, et cetera. And like all of those focuses of information are valid. You just got to decide which one it works for the current situation. And it's not like you shouldn't be like, I look for jump reads because that is like I'm good at that. No, that's like that's nonsense. You got to look for jump reads when that information makes sense. You got to play defensive when it makes sense. And also in terms of mentality, like you got to find the reasons, the motivations, the goals that make sense for you. So even for ApolloKage, and again, I don't mean like any disrespect, there's still like a little bit of toxicity in the mindset in terms of comparing yourself to others. If you want to be top 5, you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. Whereas like that comparison makes no sense inherently. But there needs to be a little bit of like passion. There needs to be something that stings for when you lose, but it needs to be manageable, right? You need to be able to be sad and then take that energy from getting sad and turn it into productivity. Because if there's no energy when you lose, then there's no progress, right? So for mentality as well, right? Like make a choice. What is the amount of comparing to others, of being unkind to yourself that fits how much time you put into the game, where you want to end up, etc., etc. So yeah, like huge kudos to you, ApolloKage, because I think more than anything, like what you've done really well is reflect on the trade-offs in these situations and have decided on things that work for you while being flexible enough to also do things that used to not work for you, but you practice it enough to make it work for you. And I think that's like really impressive. And if you just follow that process, I think anyone can get to the top.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I guess my sign-off thing, I have to talk about the Mafia game. We could have won, man.
Oh my God.
You know what's crazy?
Cut the tape.
You know what's crazy? It's also my fault, because there was a way we could have. Well, one, I was a dumbass and I forgot about the double jeopardy. There was an OS. We could have won, guaranteed, because we knew Tweak was town for sure, right? Because we're going off of Gamer being cop and he died the next night, right? So, because Mars had to kill him, or whoever was Mafia. So essentially, so you know that you're town, and you know that Tweak's town. So it's either me or Mars. So you probably thought it essentially came down to a coin flip, right? And you took the coin flip.
Yeah.
But what I could have said was, look, we vote for me, and I can vote for myself, because Tyler or Mars, the Mafia, won't vote for me, right?
Wait.
So we would have won 3-1 if all of us voted for me, including me. You go into the last night, and then you Vigi shot Mars, right? Instead of, because you know Tweak's town. So it's not entirely your fault that we lost. If I
yeah, like 80-20.
If I wasn't
character growth.
Yeah,
character growth.
If I wasn't raging, if I wasn't raging,
arc.
You know, because Haz pointed it out to me. Like we're in the gym, and Haz was like, you guys had a guaranteed win, and I was like, what is? And he was like, assuming that you guys believed that Gamer was cop, which I think we all like believed that he was. Cop,
100%.
Right, 100%. Then like we knew one person was town, so there was still a win. which
Dude, Charles really has been competing again. He's reflecting on his sins.
Oh
Let's
yeah, no, dude,
It's
real
crazy.
quick, man.
You
Oh,
are-
dude, shout out to Charles, man, because
Yeah.
we went to QuaiCon. He competed. He was jamming it. Dude
Let's
died at 0
go.
from Akasia, freaking Gates of Hell. And you know what? He took the next game.
I
dude.
did take the next game.
Let's
go.
Let's
He
go.
took the next game.
Getting it.
All
I
right.
did lose the set.
So
but I took the next
definitely
game.
character growth. Character growth is happening.
That's an
I
art,
mean, your
bro.
goal wasn't to win
That
the
is
set; it
definitely
was
an
to
art,
not get
man.
mad.
It was
True.
not to get. It was
Hey,
not
reach
to,
your goal.
There you go.
not to get frustrated to the
Yeah.
point where it fucks up my gameplay in the set. I was definitely pissed after
Yeah.
the set, but
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
fine.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
That's the sting. That's the sting
Yeah.
that you turn
That's
into
the passion.
productivity.
right,
Exactly.
right. That's the
He's
No,
the
but-
kid to have that.
Honestly,
Um,
I absolutely love social deception games regardless. And I was like,
It is
hey,
fun.
it doesn't matter what I do. We do it to extremes, baby. 3-0 the best player in the world, be the worst mafia player, only extremes around here.
Yeah.
Best snake,
there you
worst
go.
snake.
I respect
Yeah.
it.
Best snake,
I
worst
respect
snake.
Let's go.
Let's go,
Oh,
Snake.
All
I
right.
need
Well,
that's a good phrase.
all right.
Yeah.
That's a great way to end the episode, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let us know what you guys think about Snake in the comments below, and we'll be seeing you next time. Class dismissed.
All right. Later, y'all.